In this video, we're going to look at the different shader options that you have available to you guys in Maya. We're also going to look at different rendering techniques. So, how do we look at rendering within Maya? There's different ways that we can look at rendering in Maya, and there's different ways we can access those different attributes. Rendering editors would be first port of call and the render view. This would show us, if we hit this little clapperboard, what we're getting from the offset. What we're going to do is we're going to take this back to basic. I'm going to select all of the objects and I'm going to right click, assign new material, and we're going to go through these shaders a little bit. So at a very basic level, Lambert is the most basic of shaders that you can get in 3D with Maya. It's just a very flat shader. Let's just that's fine. And then if we hit render on this, so we'll see what we'll get. So you can see it's very flat. So again, this might have uses. So what you will notice is there are no kind of it's a very different shader to, for example, Blinn, which gives us a little bit of fall off in terms of like the specular quality. So subtle differences there straight away. So let's just change this back to Lambert and we'll kind of go through the options you have available to you. So first off is the color channel. So we can change this color black. We can make it totally black. It's obviously not going to be visible. We'll still get access to the alpha channel. This would be RGB channel. Let's just ramp this right up, and you can see there we're getting some color within the diffuse channel. You can select this little color element here and we can change color on the fly. It'll change in the viewport. If we hit the clapperboard, it'll render. What's kind of useful when you come to rendering is using this little render region tool. So let's say we want to make a change to this and then we want to see our result. So I've just hit this little save. You can see if you leave the mouse over, it should tell us what this is. Keep image. So I want to keep the image so we can kind of compare the changes and the differences that we're going through. So I'm going to make this darker. I'm going to hit this clapperboard. You can see there it's rendering pretty quickly, near enough real time. It's a very basic shader, hence why it's really quick. The other option available would be IPR rendering, which is interactive progressive rendering. I think it's interactive progressive rendering. The I definitely stands for interactive, I think. Right, so let's just move this out a touch and then select a region. And you can see there it's scanning through. If we make any changes, it's instant. If we select the whole image and make changes to it, you can see a bit of processing kind of going on under the hood. It's useful, but again, depending on the machine that you're using, it mightn't always be super useful for what you're doing. So maybe a good way to work would be render, clapperboard, pick a region, tweak it, select another area, work in sort of slices almost like this, so you can see any of the subtle changes that you're getting from this. Really simple way of working. So you can see there, this is the color. We can also, additional to using color, we can plug in any number of elements. So in this case, let's say click on file. You could obviously use any of the different attributes within here, anything that you wanted. Say if you wanted a movie plugged in, or some noise, or grid, or fractal, things like that. But in this case, let's use a file. Hit the file and it's going to change the icon to, let's just select that again so we can see. So color is black and you get presented with this little input node. Let's just hit this input node and it'll take us to the file, or the file node where it's going to be located. And let's just let's go Dropbox and my bad 3D tracking. I'm just wanting a base metal. It's very basic. It's not going to be super advanced. It's just to give you an overview of what we're looking at. You see there it's plugged in a very basic metal shader. Okay, that's pretty decent. Let's have a little look, see the ambient color. So basically what it's going to do is it's not going to allow really for a great deal of shadow. So let's just render half of this, render, see what we'll get, and let's just start up in this ambient color. And you can see there it's very flat. There's very little shading there. If we put it right up, there we go. It's really blown out. There's even less shading. Let's drop that down. The thing that I would recommend you do is start experimenting with these different shaders. So incandescence is effectively a light. So let's just slide this up. You should be able to see that. Again, it will work very much as a light. Full white, off and you can see there you can get some nice little subtleties with it, depending on the kind of look that you're going for. Hit render and you can start to experiment with it. You could also plug in different colours, and again you get different effects with those colours. Again, it's very much so experimentation, looking at different materials, looking to see what affects what. So this shade is carried across the whole mesh, so I'm going to drop that back down to black, and you should be able to see when we render this. Well, that's kind of what we're getting. Let's have a little look at the diffuse. Let's take the diffuse off. So basically this diffuse value means that there is no light going to be absorbed into this. So if we turn this back up, it'll have full absorption of light, and you can see there you're getting some really. Let's render the whole thing. Let's save this out so we can compare. Let's hit there to save to compare, and let's just hit render. And if we toggle, you can see the difference in contrast between that. You know, you're getting there's quite a big difference. So Lambert, very basic. You know, there's other options available to you as well, but Lambert is a very basic shader. Think of using it for flat objects, also other objects that we're going to apply it to. So let's select this mesh again, and you can. So at the moment this is plugged into. Let's select that. This is plugged into the color channel. Let's say we want to break this connection. You just right click where the text is, and hit break connection, and it's just going to break that connection to that texture. So let's change this Lambert to a Blinn, and you're starting to get slightly more interesting options. In this case, you're starting to get slightly more reflective. You're getting more fall off with the material, so basically depending on the light direction. And you can see the main difference is actually down here with the specular shading tab. So let's start playing around with this. Let's say we want something to be quite unique, quite hot maybe. Let's hit render, and you can see there we're getting some really nice highlights. Let's expand this out, getting way hotter highlights. Let's just plug this back into the again, it's a very sort of quick basic way of looking at this, but let's see what we're going to get. You're going to get little subtleties of the metal popping through perhaps, but we might need to just drop this down a touch. And this metal's kind of coming through a little. This eccentricity. So basically the eccentricity is how concentrated this highlight is. This is just like, there's way more fall off. The higher the value, the more fall off. The lower the value, the less fall off. So you should start to see like smaller changes. So again, it's very sort of basic. It still has its uses. It's still a very useful tool to use, very useful shader to use. So again, okay, we're looking at the shaders, and the key thing is to experiment. Those aren't the only shaders available to you, but those are Lambert and Blinn. You also have Phong, and again, it's just a different way of working with almost a metallic type of shader that you get different effects with. And then let's just render that. You can see the fall off again, subtly different, slightly more nuanced in that it's more gradual. You're getting like a nicer fall off. And if you rotate around the object, you can see that you should be getting different subtleties with that. There are many more options, and the key thing is that you explore these a little more in depth yourselves as well. It's a lot of it is about finding your feet with this. Also, what we'll have is a Phong, a ramp shader. So really basic. It's just a flat shader. Let's say we'll give this color. Let's change this to perhaps white. Face and angle. So what should happen is brightness. You can see you're getting a very different sort of material, and we can play around with these sliders. We can get some really cool effects like right off the bat. Just playing around with these sliders. But again, it's very stylized, this sort of shader. It's very very, very, very specific. So at the minute it's based off the lighting. We can change this to face and angle. You can see there it's totally different to what we were getting. Yeah, it's the key thing is just experimenting with it. Have a play, have a little dabble, and there's some pretty cool effects that you can get with it. So these are all quite basic shaders. They're not particularly advanced shaders, and they're really nice. That the kind of look that we're getting from these. Okay, so the next part of this, let's say we're happy with this shader. That looks kind of cool, kind of neat. What we're getting with that. Okay, we're just rendering images from within this. The next thing that we need to do is start looking at our render settings, and to get access to our render settings we need to hit this little checkerboard with clapperboard, sorry, with this little wheel. So this brings up our I'm just going to hide that over there so we can really focus in on this a bit more. Let's just grab this and just move this out, so we've got full access to this window. So let's just go over this. So common attributes for within this sort of render. What we need to do is, let's say we want to render an image sequence which is 150 frames long. We need to first give it a prefix. So this is the name, so Roboto, and the image format. Depending on the image format, let's say you want it to have an alpha channel, you would need to use something like an IF or PNG or TIFF or Target. In this case I'm just going to use an IF. It's my own inbuilt image format, and After Effects plays relatively nicely with it. We're not going to be doing multipass with this render. It's just going to be for a test and just to show you the workflow. So let's say we're going to be rendering this as a full 150 frame sequence. Let's say frame animation. At present it's set to name.extension single frame, and you can see name.extension would be an if, and then single frame. Let's change this to name.extension.number. Really important that you do that, because if we change it the other way, name.number.extension, After Effects wouldn't read it. Actually, I think you do need to do it that way. Name.number.extension. If you were to do it the other way, my bad. If you were to do it name.extension.number, it would effectively spit them out as robot.if.0001 file, and the Mac or After Effects would get a bit confused with that. So make sure you do it name.number.extension if you're rendering an image sequence. So the frame pattern, if we look closely here, we've got 0001, and if we start adjusting that frame pattern, we don't want any frame pattern. Let's just set it as that. And it would start with frame 1, and it would basically work up through the numbers. But if you needed specifically like a very purposeful frame pattern, then you would just set it like that. But generally, frame pattern, you don't always need it. So frame range, we want to start with frame 1, and it's going to end at frame 150. I'm going to type in 150, and the renderable camera is going to be the camera that you're going to be using. So this next element is really important. If you wanted to have an alpha channel, you would include the alpha channel, but that's obviously only going to include an alpha channel on image formats that allow you to work with alpha channels. The image size preset, currently HD 540. What we want to do is set that to maybe HD 1080, and that's fine. So you'll see there 1920 1080. And another key thing to remember within this common drop down is turning this option off, render options, enable default light. Let's just turn that off and see what we'll get. Rolling render, that should still give us our render. Actually it hasn't, because we're using a very specific shader. In this case we're using a ramp shader, so we do need to include that. In a lot of cases you might need to turn this off if and only if you're not using any lighting within this scene. So yeah, this is just something to bear in mind. And you can see there it's quite jaggy. So the next thing that we need to do is come into the My Software drop down, and at the minute it's set to low quality, hence why it's really jaggy. Let's set this quality to production quality, and default should work. Let's save this image out and then hit render. It should take a little longer to render. If we hit this 1:1, it'll zoom in and give us the actual size of the image. And then if we compare the options, you can see this image is much crisper, and we can actually change things and make it even sharper. So contrast sensitive, let's change the filter to let's change it to box filter and drop these. Let's see what we'll get. Again, save the image, hit render. And the thing that you're looking for now that we're starting to change these settings, is any difference in image quality. It's a little bit crisper. 2 seconds. It's still taking 2 seconds to render a frame. And then you might just want to have a little dabble with these settings here. So at the moment ray tracing's turned off. We're not using any ray tracing shaders on this, so it shouldn't really affect performance. Actually, we've turned that on and it has affected the performance. Let's see what we're getting in terms of render. Even just by turning that ray tracing on, it's give us quite a... It's because the shader's got some reflectivity there. So maybe let's turn reflections off and we'll leave refractions off. Save that, hit render. 3 seconds, that's given us it. So this is what we've got, this is what we had. That's a bit nice. So just by turning this off, it's sped it up by a second. So you might think, like, oh, what's a second? But over 150 frames, so you've got a deadline, quite tight deadline, and you need to really press ahead with getting this render out. It can make the difference. Okay, so let's say we're happy with our settings. Let's just make sure that this is going to spit this image sequence out to where we want it to go to. So I'm not too fussed at the moment. So it's currently going to render this image sequence out to users, myself, desktop, Saloon Uni, VR, blah 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 blah. We want to change that. Change the project image directory and set this to images. Oh yeah, images. Let's change this to Chris, Maya, projects, default, select. So it should just, might need to change that to default images, select. And it should just plop it in images, hit accept. So now this should go to users, Chris, documents, Maya, projects, default images, which is normally where any of your rendered images would go. So now what you need to do is, to get this render started, change from the modeling or whatever drop down that you have, change to rendering, and then hit render, batch render, and then in the little box here, use all available processes, batch render and close, and you should see now rendering with my software, and you should see this. Let's just open up the script editor, and it should let's clear this, and you should start to see the process kind of kick in, and it'll give you a bit of a readout of all commands is turned on. There we go. It's starting to spit out our frames with frame 1, it's done a frame, it's up to frame 2, and so on and so on. So that's how you'd go about using some Maya shaders. Really simple, really basic shaders. But just to give you an overview of that, and in the next video what we'll do is we'll look at Viewport 2.0, how you can basically render in real time using the GPU. Really simple. And then we'll look at Arnold, and then we'll start to look at lighting as well, how we can add in lights and change those settings with lights. Okay, that's the end of that video.